Okay. Hi, I'm Vikki Coombes and I'm here with Tilde to talk to her about multiple passions. So you all know that I have them, but also so do millions of other people around the world. And I've met some incredible people as I've been traveling, and Tilde is one of them. So she currently lives in Texas, and but we met in London. So over the last few years, we've had a number of conversations. And when we were talking to each other about me being a hummingbird, Tilde suddenly went, "Oh, I think that might be me." And there was some resonance there, wasn't there, Tilde? So can you share with us a little bit about what it was that resonated about that idea of having multiple passions?
Yes, absolutely. And well, I just want to thank you, first of all, for having me on. I appreciate it. And I think for me, when we first met, and you started telling me about the work that you did, and talking about what exactly a hummingbird was, because I've always had this affinity with a hummingbird because they're known for spreading the love and joy, right? And I always associated, or at least thought that I could associate myself as being a hummingbird in that sense. But when you started to talk to me about the different, having multiple passions, it really resonated with me because that's how I perceive myself, as having multiple passions. And so it really made me stop to think about all the things that I had been passionate about doing, and how I had actually had to come to a place where I was okay with that. And having those multiple passions, being good at a lot of different things,
Mhm.
and enjoying a lot of different things. So for me, in meeting you, that was really interesting, and even more curious about, how to go about really leveraging the passions that I do have, and then also the struggles of being that type of personality, to have multiple passions, but really trying to focus more on how to leverage those things that we love to do.
So over, a potted history, if you look at your passions, do you have a kind of strands that are the same, or have they completely changed when you think about
I
how you?
think when I look back on my life, there's certain things that have changed, but the core of who I am has always remained the same. And so I have always been passionate about empowering women and girls, period.
Okay. Yeah.
And in the forms that I've done them, that has changed. So the delivery has changed, but the core of who I am and the values that I have has not. And
Okay.
so for me, I've had multiple jobs. I've been an Army counterintelligence agent. I've been a over the road truck driver, driving those big 18 wheelers. My husband and I took an adventure one year and did that.
Wow.
And then I had a 20-year career at Southwest Airlines as an aircraft dispatcher there, and then decided to retire early and jump out and do Womanars full time. And so they're all vastly different industries and
Yeah.
jobs.
Yeah.
But the core of who I am has always remained the same. And I think that's the critical piece for anyone that is a hummingbird to really focus in on is to know who you are, why you're here, what your values are, so that then your job is just your job. It's not doesn't define you in any sense.
Yeah. So that piece you're talking about the woman, for you, the woman and girls, and empowering them to be all that they can be. Um, I refer to that as our underlying patterns, right? So even when people talk to me about having the purpose or the thing or the one, I'm always like, why does it have to be one to start with?
Mhm.
Um, and the second piece for me is that, a bit like you were saying, it doesn't have to be at the surface, right? So for me, when I looked at, like you, I'd had really diverse career. Well, on the surface, they looked like really diverse careers, really
Right.
diverse types of things. I'd been a lawyer, I'd been a probation officer or parole officer in the US. I'd been a human resources type person. I'd been a management consultant, and it all looked different on the surface. And at one point, I looked into going into interior design, and people would say to me, "I don't get it," right? when the first time that happened to me, that I don't get it, got said to me, it's by a recruitment agent. It was when I moved to the UK, and I went, well, it makes sense to me. What are you missing? Like I had to step back and really look at it and think, what do I know that they aren't seeing? And when I look at my curriculum vitae, what are they missing? And that's when I looked underneath it, and went underneath all of that, it's always about people, and it's always about change. It's about those people meeting their potential. Mm-hmm. And that's what fascinates me. And so all of those roles, when you actually looked at the reason why I enjoyed them and got into them, I was fascinated by them. It was about people and change, and they're evolving, and giving them opportunities. So it sounds like you also have that kind of underlying, like you're saying, your pattern. And when I look at my patterns and, like you're saying, my values, it's not that my values are absolutely stagnant, because they do shift slightly, but actually the top 3 or 4 have stayed the top 3 or 4 most of the time, right? And again, they've shown up differently. The way they've shown up in my life and what has mattered to me, and what has mattered to me has shown up, has looked different. But actually, again, when I've looked at the value underneath that, why is that important to me? It's the same set of core values. Mm-hmm. So when you look at your patterns so when you talk about values, what are you talking about there?
So what I mean by values are for me, my top 3 values are number 1, equality and justice. Uh-huh. Second one is spirituality, and the third one is gratitude. So those are the types of values that I'm talking about. The other 2, like you, can be flex, from time to time, but those 3 for me are my core values, and those are the things that help me to thrive in my life. And so if I am doing something that provides justice and equality, for others, or I'm in a lane of, if I'm doing spiritual practices on a daily basis, I just happen to also teach that in my courses and programs. And, the gratitude factor, I teach that as well. So it becomes part of a daily practice, a daily routine, or something that I talk about and do on a daily basis. So it keeps me in a really positive space to where I feel like I'm thriving. And I don't feel like I'm ever drained. And I can't say I'm never drained, because I have been drained. And that's what keeps me going back to these values, because it reminds me, like, hey, you didn't do your gratitude practice today, or when's the last time that you meditated or you prayed or something, But for me, those are my core values and the way that I live my life, so that I can keep pouring back into others as well. You and I have a common, I think, underlying theme, or what I call my why. Mm-hmm. And that's to help others reach their highest potential, right? Yep. And for me, it's connecting to that true source of power. You can call God, you can call your higher power, whatever it is to you personally. But for me, it's God. And so really reminding people how important that alignment, that connection is with God, so that we can have access to infinite resources, infinite creativity. For me, that's where it all begins. So, but living aligned with your values, I think, is critical, because that really does define you and the quality of life that you'll have.
So when, as a person with multiple passions, I imagine that there are people in your life who've been a little bit confused at times when you've changed from doing one thing and suddenly you've changed something else. They'd kind of got on board with whatever it was you were into, and then suddenly you're like, actually, now I'm into this thing. Have you ever had people say to you things like, why don't you just choose one thing and settle down, or, anything like, have you ever had to deal with that?
All the time. Mainly, why don't you get a real job, Tilde? Yeah. And I think that happens to a lot of us that really have the courage to do something different, to go out and start all over again. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not afraid to do that. But there's a lot of people that like security, right? And they need to know that X, Y, and Z is going to happen. and they like the routine. They just like that security. And I have learned that, yes, I do like security, but I don't need it per se. I like the adventure of life. I like for things to naturally unfold for me. I like the mystery of not knowing how something is going to unfold. I have a goal, an end goal in mind, but how I get there is, I'm flexible about it. And I think that's what is different between hummingbirds and people who ask, why don't you get a real job? Because they are the other type of people that need to know and like the structure, and have to have that security of knowing everything. And fortunately for me, I think I don't need to know everything. I need to know where I'm going, and that I'm still on a path to get there.
Yeah, and it, like you're saying, it could go all sorts of different directions to get to that goal. You can approach it from many different ways. So one of the stories that always comes to mind when I think about that concept of settling down was when Gareth and I bought this house I'm currently standing in. Quite a lot of our friends said to us, because we're both hummingbirds, oh, finally you're settling down, right? It's going to be a long time until you have a housewarming party again. This kind of idea that because we've invested in property, therefore that's it, right? We've settled down. And both of us were just like, no, it's an investment. We can still go and do other things. We're not tied by a rock to this thing. But like you're saying, there is that concept, and I think a lot of people I know that have got multiple passions and need, right? But for me, there's a need for variety in my life. Like as you said, the words, and I absolutely recognise, and I have friends who are like this, that have that need for routine, that need for a certain level of sameness in their day-to-day life in order to feel comfortable and happy and content. When I find myself in that place, I actually go completely the other way, and sometimes it'll creep up on me, because one of the conversations I've been having recently is, it's not that hummingbirds have no routines, right? Otherwise we wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. So of course routines, but even things like household chores, I'm like, oh my God, didn't I just do the washing? Surely I've just done that, but there is that need for variety in our lives. But at the same time, in order, when you're saying you've got a goal and you're following whatever path opens up to you, you've achieved a lot in your life. One of the things I also hear around this day-to-day life management is, I don't feel that I've achieved anything, because I'm constantly doing lots of little bits and pieces, because I keep changing my interests. But I know for myself, I know for you, we've both achieved a lot in our lives at various points, and then we've moved on to something else, but we've achieved significant things. How have you done that? How have you achieved some of your key goals? Like, give us an example of one that you've achieved that people will go, wow, and how you did that.
Yeah, I think for me, the one that first comes to mind, is retiring early from a cushy 6-figure job and doing Womanars full time. That was a goal, and it was a scary goal, even for a hummingbird that loves the adventure and the mystery. But when you're giving up a 6-figure and 5-figure income, a monthly income, it's really scary to go from that to not having any income and wondering whether or not you're going to be able to make it. So for me, that was probably the biggest goal that I've had thus far. And so what I've done even prior to that, but with that goal in particular, it was focus.
Okay.
Focus, right? And I think this is what a lot of people might do wrong, is that we constantly, it's natural to focus on what we don't have or what's going wrong, or, things we could have done differently. We focus on the past. And so for me, I really had to think about that goal. And my goal was to, do Woman Arts full time. I'd had it as a side hustle, but I started to think about, okay, what is it that I need to do to get to that goal? And so then it's when I started looking at my finances. What is it that I need to do with my finances to get prepared for that? How much money do I want to have in the bank before I retire early and can feel secure in being able to do that? So it was steps like that that I started to think about. And I didn't think about everything that I wish I had, but I thought about enough things. I thought about enough things that made it easier for me. And I really kept thinking about how happy I was going to be in signing that dotted line and leaving a job that I'd had for 20 years and that I enjoyed for 20 years, but I no longer enjoyed it. And so it made it really, really easy to be grateful for those 20 years and to be grateful for all the amazing friendships and experiences that I had there. But I also knew that it was time to go. It resonated with my spirit. It felt good to say, I'm retiring early and this is what I'm going to be doing. And so, and I think with anything like that, after that, this couple of years ago, I just really felt in my spirit again, like, Tilde, it's time for you to go to Europe and teach and speak in Europe. And so I walked into my house one day and just felt like it was time to sell it and do that thing, that everybody dreams of doing, to go and travel, work and travel around the world. And so I did. I put my house up for sale. 2 days later, it's got a full price offer. I didn't know where I was going, but a week later, I get a phone call from my friend in Barcelona. He says, hey, I need help in this business that I'm starting here in Barcelona. Can you come help me? Boom, there I am in Barcelona. I now have a little apartment in Dallas and spent half the year in Barcelona and in Croatia. We were talking about that a little bit, before we came on. But it's things like that you just have to follow, that I follow, and focus on the goal, and but also have a plan in place. I think is crucial too, because I think the misconception is that if you just go with the wind, so to speak, that everything will be okay. Well, not really. And I've learned that the hard way, right? I mean, you have to have a basic plan at least in place to get you to where you want to go. And I think for hummingbirds, that might be the hardest thing for us to learn. And that is to really focus and to create those steps that are going to get us to where we want to go. Because we hate, or at least I hate, that to be put in a box.
Oh, yeah. Because then you can't fly.
Hummingbird likes to fly free, doesn't like the cage. So, but also make it like a game. I've learned to make it like a game, in the plan. And if that plan has to change, I'm also flexible to it. So,
yeah, because you're right. So one of the things, because for me, when I think about the things I've done, so moving over here, for instance, from New Zealand, so, the other side of the planet, it took 2 years to put that into action. From the first, let's do it. It was okay. Well, but like you, we had to think about finances. We had to think about how we would close things down in New Zealand. We had to think about how we'd open things up over here. We had to think, we wanted to also think about what we do between New Zealand and arriving in the UK. We wanted to experience some stuff first. It was, how do we want to do this and what do we do? And one of the things I keep hearing is, but if I choose that thing, then I won't be doing that thing, right? I'm like, so have you got examples where you've juggled multiple passions at the same time, when you've had goals that for different passions and you've either had to make a choice to focus on one, or you've been able to have 2 or 3 quite key things going on in your life?
Oh, that's a tricky question, because everything I do is centered on, as far as my business is concerned, it's inspiration, education, and collaboration.
Okay.
So I think as a business owner, you have to know what your mission is. That is my mission in
Yeah.
everything I do.
Yeah.
And so if it doesn't fall in those three areas, then I really have to think about what is it that I'm giving up of those three, and is it worth it to go outside of my sphere of happiness, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I try and include my passions in everything that I create. So for instance, I'm not only passionate about empowering women and girls, but I'm passionate about travel, food, good wine, good whiskey. I mean, all of those things. I love the outdoors,
The
you
rest
know?
of you and your friends.
Yeah, I mean, I love the outdoors. I like to get out there and hike and just, nature for me is where I'm the closest to God. So I love that. And so one of the things that I did this year is we have a retreat in Italy in September, right? And so it's a combination of everything. I'm
Yeah.
coaching a little bit. We're having some relaxation. We're in a beautiful place. We're in the outdoors. We're eating amazing food and wine. And so that's how I include all those other passions of mine, and I want to share that with other women on this retreat. So I think that's how I include stuff, whether I'm doing it on my own,
Yeah.
going for a wine tasting or going for a nice dinner with friends. And again, this retreat is all about connection. And so for me, that connection with other people is really important, is one of my passions. I love to connect with other people. I find people fascinating, and I don't care what background you have, I just find people fascinating and I love them. And so it really gives me an opportunity also to connect with women that I might not ever have met had I not done this retreat, you know? And so, and to see the magic kind of happen within that sort of environment is also a passion of mine, to bring people together that wouldn't necessarily have ever met, but then walk away as the best of friends. So I think as a business owner, it's really figuring out, okay, what passions can I include into my business that will also serve others, but also having those passions that you set aside for yourself and you do on your own. So I think that's really what has helped me as somebody with multiple passions to be able to live comfortably and happily, knowing that I'm including all of those things into my life, in both business and my personal life.
Yeah. So one of the things I say to my clients when I'm working with them around this issue is, what I find sometimes is they're trying to put absolutely every passion they've ever had in their lives into their business, or into
Right.
or finding a job that fulfills all of that. Or, if they don't want to be a business person, they still want to be an employee, but they still look for this perfect job that has everything in it. And I'm like, well, actually, why don't you look at which of your passions can fit within your income generation, however you might do that, and what do you have for your fun time, right? What and often, I mean, I found for myself with the business when I was setting it up, because I knew myself, right, and I know that my forever is 2 years, but I also know that I want my business to be a lot longer than that, sustainable. I had to really think about, actually, like you were saying, it went back to what are those core values of the business and how do they align with my core values, and also how do they feed my passions, so that if the output of my business is slightly different or changes or segues, as long as it meets those things, then it's still the same business.
Yeah.
Whereas in my personal life, things can change a lot more frequently, right? So
Right.
I might be interested in this thing this week and then something completely different next week. And
Mm-hmm.
that's fine, because it's in my fun time and it's not impacting, not only my income, but potentially income of other people. That,
Right.
there's something about business which is about committing to others, right?
Yeah, and I also think it's important to note, at least, so that, because there's so much pressure or so much information out there about making your passion your purpose. And I don't think that's true for everyone.
Mm.
And because I think sometimes, you are in a job that is fulfilling, and utilizing your skills, your talents, your strengths, all of those things. But the reason you might not be as happy as you'd like to be is because you're not fulfilling your passions outside of work, where you might really enjoy being artistic or creative, but your job doesn't allow you to do that. So why not do it outside of the work environment? So because I think there's you add a lot of pressure to yourself in saying, well, I have to learn how to earn a living from this passion or that passion. And that's not necessarily the case. I think sometimes for those of us that are fortunate to be able to do that, that's great. But for a lot of people, they are passionate about their job or they like their job. It doesn't necessarily have to be their passion. They just have to learn how to incorporate their passions into their daily life outside of their job, because then that will also allow them to thrive in their work environment, because they're going to be happier people.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other challenge I find with people when we're talking about this topic is particularly where they've got families, young families, and they're going, but I don't have time, and I've got all these passions. I'm like, well, actually, I mean, I don't have kids. I've never had kids. But all of my friends that have kids are not necessarily people with multiple passions, but none of them have time, right? It's not about I have multiple passions and I have kids, I don't have time to do my multiple passions. It's I have kids and I work, I don't have time, right? Like it's just, right. It's that kind of thing of, it's not necessarily about having multiple passions that stops you having time. Sometimes it's about the life choices you've made. And sometimes it's about saying, I've made this life choice, or I have this overarching goal, right? So a bit like you were saying about when you decided you were going to retire early, you planned out how you were going to do that and at what point and all that kind of thing. Same with when I moved over here. It wasn't I've got the patience of a newt. I could quite happily have dropped everything and come over the next day. That would have worked in a different way.
Yeah.
But it was about lifestyle choices. For that 2 years that we knew it was going to take us before we moved over here, we were like, right, we're going to still be here for the next 2 years. How do we make the most of that, right? But like you were saying earlier about when people spend all their time looking at what they don't have,
yeah,
rather than what they do have, right?
Yeah. And I think, going back to your point about women who say that they don't have time because of kids or, all the multiple passions that they have, I think it'd be great that a mom would share their passion with their kids. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a sitter or if you don't have someone to take care of your kids so that you can go out and pursue your passion, then include them in it. I think for me, looking back on my childhood, I would have loved for my parents to share their passion, and they did. They shared their passion with us all the time. They loved horses. My dad loved horses. He would take us out to the horse races, or just to go and be with him, watch him as they were training the horses. All those things. So include your kids in your passion. Don't think that you have to exclude them, because for me, those are some of the best memories I have.
Yeah, same. It's the same actually. And my parents, so mum, for instance, got us all involved in guiding. So I think you guys call it Girl Scouts. But so she was one of the leaders in that, so that we were involved with her. So when we would do things like camping or whatever, then, we'd go along with her. And it almost seems to be the other way around now, where parents do everything for the children's theoretical interests rather than kind of having a bit of both, where the kids also, like you're saying, get to share in what the adults enjoy.
Yeah.
So you talked earlier about having a career where you had six figures. So this is again one of there was literally on one of the groups I belong to, someone put on there the other day, and there seems to be this underlying belief that because people have multiple passions and change careers and jobs and interests and skill sets and knowledge bases, they can't get to that mystical six-figure thing. And then basically the question got put out there, is there anyone in this group that does that? And I had to say, well, yes. But I also knew that I wasn't the only one, right? I knew yourself, my partner, lots of other hummingbirds I know that do well financially and are recognized and valued and rewarded. again, have you had to do the hard fight to get there, or was it that you chose a particular way to do that and did, like you're saying, do your passions outside? I mean, how did you do that?
I think it's always a hard fight, no matter what. For any entrepreneur to reach six figures, you have to work. You have to.
Yeah.
It's not going to come to you because you're praying about it or, wishing for it, saying all the right affirmations for it. I mean, it is hard work. And I think that's what I've learned is that, and that's where that plan comes into play is, you have to look at what are those services that you want to offer. If my goal is to make $100,000 this year, then what is it that I need to do to get me there? Mm-hmm. How many products, how many services do I have to sell in order to get there? And what am I really going to be focused on? And again, that's a difficult thing for a hummingbird, right? Mm-hmm. Because as soon as you start making a list of all the products or services, you can make a list of 20. For me, it has been really important to just hone in on those 3 to 4 things that I really want to concentrate on. For instance, this retreat. I'm concentrating on this retreat to fill it. Then once that's filled, I've got a webinar. That I'm working on. And then after the webinar, I've got a boot camp that I'm doing, a confidence boot camp for women, a group boot camp. So those 3 things this year are like the thing right now for me. Those are the things that I'm working on. Those are the things that I'm focused on filling, and so that I can reach my goal for this year. Yeah. So because, 6 figures as an entrepreneur, and I just sent out an email this morning about getting unstuck, because I had been seeing that a lot for women entrepreneurs in the groups that I'm in, and even for leaders. And so I sent out an email about the 3 things, that might be keeping you stuck. And a friend of mine responded to the email and said, did you know that 88% of women entrepreneurs don't reach 6 figures? And I thought, wow, yes, I did know that, but thank you for reminding me, because that's huge, and for me, it's a mindset issue, really. Yep. A mindset and a focus. It's not necessarily that they don't know how to get there. It's having so much information sometimes that they can't filter through it, or not having the confidence to do what it takes to get to that, to their goal. So, I think for any entrepreneur, it is a matter of focus. It's about doing the work. It's about getting crystal clear about what it is that you want at the end of the year or at the end of the quarter, and then putting those, taking action in order to be able to get there, and being okay, again, with being flexible, because you need to be flexible. You need to have that emotional resiliency when people keep telling you no, for you to be able to look at the product or the service and to think about how it is that you might need to tweak it. Mm-hmm. If everybody's saying no, why not start asking people why not? And be open to that constructive criticism. But that's only going to help you to really find out what is it that's missing from this product that I need to add, so that people will start saying yes. So all of those things for me are, that I've learned the hard way.
Yeah. And I'm sitting there going, because I too have been learning those lessons. And I think you were saying earlier about women's confidence. And I would actually extend that across almost all the hummingbirds I've come across, that they have this almost, there's something wrong with me. They've come into this with, there's something wrong with me. Everyone else has got the one thing. And I'm always like, who is everyone? Right? That's another whole conversation. But they kind of have that similar thing about a lack of confidence of putting themselves out there and saying, here's what I can offer you, and here's what, value that has. And I keep saying to them, it's not just about you saying, here are all the things I can do for you, and they'll pick and choose. You need to sit there and go, what do they need? And what do they need that I can meet? Because that's what they're going to value, because you're meeting something they need. And, it's unlikely that they're going to use everything that you offer.
Yeah.
But by being clear about what they need and how you can meet that need, and do some other things that they may not have thought about yet, then you start adding value, then you start being recognized, then you start being rewarded. And it also applies, yes, it definitely applies to entrepreneurs, but it also applies within employment.
Yeah.
Right? When I think about where I have, before I jumped ship, right, and I was employed and got to the level of seniorities I did and worked at those levels of authority, etc., got paid very nicely for it. It wasn't luck. It wasn't, it was that I sat there and went, I'm interested in doing that, which is totally different from what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
How do I get myself over there? What do I need to start learning now so that when I go and have these conversations with them, I'm showing that I'm interested. I'm showing that I'm self-generating myself into what they're looking for. That kind of thing. It wasn't about waiting for it to land on my lap. It was how do I get there?
Mm-hmm.
How do I do that?
Yeah. And I think those are great points. And I think everybody has to ask themselves those questions, because it's not just about coming up with a new product. Is there a need in the marketplace for that product or service? And so it took me a few rounds of iteration in my own products and services, to finally realize, because I kept comparing myself, and comparison, ladies, is the killer to all creativity, because that's when we forget that we're uniquely made. We have a unique experience, a life experience or work experience that nobody else has. And when we continually compare ourselves to other people or products or services, that's when we get stuck. And that's when we get totally confused, totally unclear about who we are or what we're supposed to be doing, what we're supposed to be selling, how much to price things. All of those things just become total fog. I know they did for me, until I finally took time to myself and said, no more coaches, no more classes, no more nada. I am just going to be by myself, with me, with God, and I need to get clear about what it is that I bring of value to people. And that's when I came up with this program that's all about increasing women's confidence and courage using spirituality and positive psychology practices, because for the longest time I had tried to keep spirituality out of my business. Yeah. I can't. It's my value. It's one of my core values. So for me, and it's also one of the things that has sustained me, my faith has sustained me throughout my life. And so I know the power that that has, not only in my life, but in, all the women that I've interviewed. I've probably interviewed about 150 women on camera and hundreds more off camera. Yeah. Over 90% of them attribute their success to their faith. And when I mean faith, I'm not talking about one religion or another. I'm just talking about believing in something that's bigger than yourself. So for me, it was really important. And one of those aha moments, like, why am I trying to separate this? Why can't I include this in my business? It's who I am, And so I was going upstream the whole time, trying to figure out a way how not to include spirituality, or how it was taboo to talk about my faith or, being spiritual in business. And no, it's critical. It's absolutely critical for us to align and connect with our higher source of power, so that then we have that clarity. We have that, faith, that emotional resiliency and hope that we need as entrepreneurs. Because if you don't have emotional resiliency, or you don't know who you are as an entrepreneur, you're not going to last long, with all the no's that come at us on a daily basis. So I think that for me was a really critical point in figuring out, okay, I have never been afraid to try something different. I have courage. I have confidence to go out there and start a business that I know nothing about, but I know that I'm capable of learning. Yeah. I have the confidence to walk any room, feel absolutely comfortable, whether it's full of men or full of women, and be able to connect with people. So for me, it was just like really thinking that time alone really helped me to think about all the strengths that I had. And then to create a course and programs and webinars that are centered all on now, increasing women's confidence and courage using the spirituality and positive psychology practices. And those are the workshops and, talks that I gave predominantly when I was in Europe last year. And it was amazing, absolutely amazing. The results that these women were getting, even, I told you a little bit about working with the Impact Hub. And when I first sat down with their leadership, I thought, I'm not going to pretend that I'm a business coach, because I'm not. That doesn't light me up, And so that was actually one of the first times that I went in and said, look, I can teach how to create content, how to create live video, how to do video production, all those things. But that's not what I'm really great at. My genius is in helping women increase their confidence and courage using these methods. And they loved it. They absolutely loved it. And because it's different, it's unique. And there's really nothing else out there, or no one out there teaching it the way I can teach it from my own life experience and my own stories that I can tell these women entrepreneurs and how it has helped my life. And so since that time, I have been continually saying it and doing it and seeing the results of it. And it's amazing. I feel like I'm in that lane and fulfilling my calling, not only my calling, but also helping other women fulfill their calling by realigning themselves to who they are and whose they are, and how we're supposed to show up in the world.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll do the one type of thing for the rest of your life, though, does it?
No, absolutely not. No. But that's the fun part, because, at the same time I'm doing all these workshops and programs and courses. I'm also in collaboration with multiple people, doing leadership trainings, doing high-level masterminds, doing collaborations, and putting education and systems into local communities. So all those things, I'm still doing all that. It's just with my business, with my passion, with my purpose, I stay in my lane. But I'm also fulfilling all those other passions by impacting communities, helping people be more influential, connecting people with people all over the world so that they can have more impact and influence. All those things I'm still doing. But again, it's in my own little sphere of hummingbird world, because I'm doing all of the things that I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, exactly. So we're very nearly at the end. Just wanted to round up with, you've talked about connections, and one of the things I think is one of our secret powers is that we, because we have all these interests, because we've made lots of changes, because in my case I move all the time, I've got people all around the world, right? My networks are extensive. And it's not just networks, my friendships are extensive as well, and they're global because of that, but also because I'm fascinated, like you, I'm fascinated by people. I always want to get to know them. I'm very warm about it. And so, but one of the challenges people talk about is there's that level of connection, but actually that true, ongoing, sustainable, deep friendships, that those are more challenging because we keep moving and changing, and and for some people, and the first time I got told that, or someone talked to me about that, I was like, I thought, actually, when I think about the long-term sustainable friendships, there are only a handful, really, when it boils down to it. And they're all around the world. None of them live within a half an hour's drive from me. So when you think about, you've talked about connection quite a lot, and that it's core for you. How does that work for you with all your different passions?
Well, and I think the double whammy for me has been that I travel and work. So, like spending 6 months away from Dallas, which is where I'm at now, and then going back potentially in June is what I'm looking at. So for me, I have my roots in Dallas. My base is Dallas. My family is here. My best friends are here as well. But the world of work is changing. And I think all of us that are, doing doing this type of work or even marketing. And I mean, you look at all the digital nomads that are out there now, you know, working from all parts of the world, which I think is awesome. But again, that creates isolation, right? Yeah. And that is one of the things that I have had to be really careful about, because like when I went to Zagreb in Croatia, I didn't know a soul. And people call me crazy for doing that, right? For going somewhere where I knew no one. But for me, it was exciting. So, but I ended up meeting some really great people there that have become my friends, who I call my friends, you know, and so continually to develop those relationships. So isolation has been one of the things that I have to be careful about, you know, because we have to make an effort to go out there and create those relationships and develop those friendships. Somebody once told me, you know, Tilde, if you want friends, go out and be one.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, I mean, that's the easiest way to make friends, right? And so that's what I keep in mind is, if I don't have friends in a city, I'm going to go out and make them. And but to continually nurture those relationships, and that's just part of who I am. So it's made it really simple to nurture those relationships, but to connect with people all over the world. Like my friend Carrie Marie and I, who's also a digital nomad, her and her family travel all over the world. And so we'll meet up in different places to work together, to have that physical connection, you know, because no matter how many video conferences you and I do, there's nothing like that human connection that we all crave. Yeah. And so the one of the things that her and I have done is she met me in Croatia when I was there, because she just happened to be there as well. I met her in New York when she was here in the States, you know, so just different things like that I've learned to do, so that I don't feel isolated. I don't start to feel depressed, because that can easily happen. And I allowed that to happen early on, because it's so easy as a solopreneur. And if you don't have a team that comes over and works with you and does these things, collaborates with you, it's really easy just to hole yourself up in your house or wherever it is that you're working and not talk to anyone.
Oh yeah.
And it really is. It's like, you know, there was 1 week where I realized, like, I hadn't talked to anyone like personally in like 5 days. I had done video conferences, but I hadn't been with anyone in 5 days. And it, for somebody like me, it really affects your happiness, you know, your level of happiness. So I have to remember that. I have to remember when I'm starting to feel a little isolated or whatever, it's just like, okay, I need to call somebody, call a friend, and, you know, just tell them I'm coming over. Because
it's also, for me, like I said, none of my close friends actually live close, right? The closest is an hour's drive away. So, but for me, it also falls back on, in some respects, that planning piece. I know all my close friends are geographically spread. And there is, like you're saying, we do video stuff, we do phone calls, we occasionally exchange emails, whatever, you know, messages, that kind of thing. But as you said, there's a richness in that person-to-person thing. And so I have to sit there and go, how am I going to see them? How am I, with everything else I've got going on? And with them, it's also about, like you're saying, either it's about, I tie it in with other things. So if I've got work in that geography, then I'll add on spending a weekend with them. Or I will say to them, I'm going to go and do this festival because it meets my passions around weird, quirky stuff. You're kind of weird and quirky too. Do you want to come? You know, like, let's do that together. So we're both still doing things we enjoy and we're getting to spend quality time together. But it does take some planning. It's not necessarily, I mean, I do have some friends, you know, social friends in the local area, and like you, I'll suddenly go, oops, I haven't left the house for 3 days. You know, I'm going to go and see them. Let's go to the pub. But with that closeness, that need for connection with those that have mattered to you and are there when the, you know, when the hard times are and the great celebrations, it's making sure, like you say, you nurture that. And that might take a little bit of forward planning, which can get in the way of segueing things. But I'm like, well, actually, I come back to that value of my connection with that person truly matters to me. And even to the point where sometimes what it's about is doing what matters to them, what they enjoy, even though it's not necessarily one of my things, but because I'm a hummingbird and I'm generally curious about everything, I'll give it a go. Right?
Yeah.
It may not become one of my things, but at least I've had a go and I've spent time with them doing something they enjoy. So it's about looking at that connection rather than wanting it to be this kind of fixed thing. Again, I think it's about that flexibility, right?
Yeah.
But it's a consciousness as well, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to be self-aware. You know, when you start to feel a little lonely, or when you start to feel, you know, there's a reason for that. So just be self-aware enough to ask yourself, when's the last time that I actually physically met with somebody and had that connection? And not just any connection. I mean, because I think you and I both have hundreds of friends, if not thousands of friends, you know, around the world. But I can honestly say I have 5 people that I confide in. Right. And so it is those 5 people that would come get me out of jail, would, you know, that love me unconditionally, that see the ugly Tilde, and it's not a big deal to them, you know. So having those people, or that one person even, that you can confide in and you can tell them anything and not feel judged, you know, I think is critical also to building those relationships, or talking to the right people, because you don't want to spill your guts to everybody out there, because that's not healthy. But really having that 1 to 2 people that you can totally confide in and be open and honest about your struggles and what you're dealing with, and spend time with at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much, Tilde. This has been awesome.